Honor and Dishonor. In the Greek camp, Achilles was sleeping with two bodies laid out beside his hut. Patroclus had been placed on a bier and covered with a fine white cloth, but Hector's corpse was lying face down in the dust. As Achilles slept, he dreamed that he saw the ghost of Patroclus. It stared down at him reproachfully. "Why haven't you given me a proper burial?" it said. "My spirit can't rest until my body has gone up in flames and my bones are decently buried. Choose an urn that will hold your bones as well when you die. We've shared everything else since we were boys together. Let's share our burial too." "I'm going to give you a magnificent funeral," Achilles said. "You should have known that. How could you doubt me?" In his dream, he reached out to hug his friend for the last time, but the ghost dissolved into the air like smoke. When Achilles opened his eyes, he was alone. He was overwhelmed with grief. Calling his soldiers together, he went out and stood beside the bier. The Myrmidons joined him, surrounding the body of Patroclus and weeping together. Agamemnon ordered the Greeks to gather wood for the funeral. They built a huge pyre, and Patroclus's body was laid out on top of it. Cutting off a lock of his own hair, Achilles put it between Patroclus's hands. Many other tributes and offerings were arranged around the body. The pyre was lit, and Achilles watched it burn. He stood there until all the flames had died down and the ashes were cold. Then he ordered Patroclus's bones to be gathered up and placed in an urn. "After that," he said, "there will be chariot races to honor Patroclus. But I won't join in. My horses are in mourning." Everyone could see that. Patroclus had always groomed Xanthus and Balius, oiling their manes till they shone. Now the horses stood with their heads drooping sadly and their long manes trailing in the dust. As he walked away from the ashes of the funeral pyre, Achilles glanced at Hector's body. "The dogs can eat that," he said. He left it lying in the dust and settled down to watch the chariot races, and his heart ached for his lost friend. Hearts were aching for Hector, too. Troy was full of mourners, and even the eternal gods honored the Trojan hero. Aphrodite came down from Olympus to protect his body, anointing it with oil of roses to keep the dogs away. Apollo sent a dark cloud to hover over it and shade it from the heat of the sun. For 11 days, Hector's body lay in the Greek camp, covered in blood and dust. Achilles was still angry about Patroclus's death. Every day he tied Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it around the mound where his friend's bones were buried. On the 12th day, King Priam decided to try to talk to Achilles. He ordered the people of Troy to prepare a new mule cart and had it filled with splendid robes and heaps of golden treasure. "I'm taking this to the Greek ships," he said, "as a ransom for Hector's body." Hecuba was appalled. "Are you mad? Do you think that monster Achilles will listen to you? How can you bear to set eyes on him? I'd rather eat his heart." But Priam was determined to go. "I know this is the right thing to do," he said, "and if Achilles chooses to kill me, at least I'll see my son's face again before I die." By the time the cart was loaded, the sun had gone down, but Priam wouldn't wait until morning. He set out in his chariot, with the mule cart in front of him and a string of fine horses following behind. The only person with him was an ancient herald. Zeus saw the two old men toiling across the plain in the dark, and he was moved with pity. "Go down and join them," he said to Hermes. "Make sure no one does them any harm." Hermes flew down to the plain, disguising himself as a young prince. Because it was dark, the old herald didn't see him right away, and when he did, he was too terrified to challenge him. He thought he and Priam were about to be killed. Hermes didn't waste time on a formal greeting. He went straight up to the chariot and took Priam's hand. "What are you doing out here in the middle of the night?" he said. "If the Greeks see your treasure, they'll attack you and kill you both. Let me come with you." Jumping into the chariot, he took up the reins and headed for the Greek camp. As they approached the wall, he put the sentries into a deep sleep. Then he drove the chariot straight through the gates, with the mule cart and the horses following behind. He made them all invisible to the Greeks, so that no one saw Priam and his treasure traveling along the beach. When they reached Achilles' hut, Hermes dropped the reins and jumped out of the chariot. "I'll leave you now," he said. "Go straight into the hut, clasp Achilles' knees, and ask for his mercy. You must try and touch his heart. That's your only chance." Priam didn't hesitate. He marched into the hut and fell at Achilles' feet, kissing his hand and clinging to his knees. "Noble Achilles," he said, "when you look at me, remember your own father. He must be proud to have a son like you. When this war began, I had 50 fine sons of my own, but most of them have been killed, and now I've lost Hector, who was the best of all. Have pity and give me back his body. I've come with a cart full of treasure to ransom it, and I've done what no other father could bear, put my lips to the hand that killed my son." Achilles was overcome by the old king's words. They pierced him to the heart. "I will give you Hector's body," he said. "Sit here and eat with me while my servants get it ready." Reluctantly, Priam sat down and accepted some food. Outside the hut, Achilles' servants were unloading the treasure. The women washed and anointed Hector's body and wrapped it in a fine robe. They lifted it into the empty mule cart, ready for the journey back to Troy. Achilles asked Priam about Hector's funeral. "How long will it last? If you tell me, I'll make sure that there's no fighting during that time." "It will take 11 days, Priam said. "On the 12th day, we will be ready to fight again." Achilles promised to arrange a truce for 11 days. Then he ordered his servants to prepare beds for Priam and the herald in the porch of his hut. "It's too late to go back now," he said. "Stay here until morning." The 2 old men settled down on the porch, but Hermes wanted to see them safely back in Troy. As soon as Achilles and his men were asleep, he roused them both. "You must leave now," he said. "If the rest of the Greeks find you here, they'll capture you and ask for another ransom." Priam and the herald got up quietly. Hermes drove them off into the dark, with the mule cart behind them. He left them outside Troy, just as dawn was breaking. Cassandra, Priam's daughter, was watching from the city walls. When she saw the body in the mule cart, she gave a scream of anguish. "It's Hector! Look how he's coming back to us!" The Trojans surged out of the city, wailing at the sight of Hector's body. Hecuba reached the cart first. She tore at her hair and stroked her dead son's face, and the crowd parted to let them through the gate. Hector's body was laid on a fine bed in his father's palace. The hall echoed with sad music, and the women of Troy gathered around, lamenting their lost prince. "You were too young to die, dear husband," sobbed Andromache. "You've left me without any message of farewell. And now Troy will fall, and your worst fears will come true. Your son and I will be sold into slavery. I am the most wretched woman in the world." She collapsed to the ground, with her friends weeping all around her, and Hecuba took over the lament. "Hector," she wailed, "you were the dearest of all my children, and you had a terrible death. Achilles treated you shamefully, but you look as though you died peacefully in your sleep. Even the gods loved you, my precious son." Grief choked her into silence, and the others cried even more bitterly. Then someone else came walking toward them, and the women stepped aside to let her through. Beautiful Helen, the cause of the whole war, stood looking down at the body of her husband's brother. "I wish I'd died before Paris brought me here," she said. "You were the best of all my Trojan family, Hector. The others resented me, but you were always kind. Now you're gone, and I have no friends left in this city. People shudder as I walk by. Alas for your death. Alas for my terrible fate." For 9 days the people of Troy wept for their dead prince. As they mourned, they made frequent trips into the hills to gather wood for his funeral pyre. On the 10th day, Hector's body was ceremonially burned, and his bones were gathered for burial. For all that time, Achilles kept his promise. The truce held, and the Greeks didn't attack. But on the 11th day, the Trojans posted sentries to keep watch while they built Hector's burial mound. Then they worked as fast as they could, afraid of being caught off guard. They knew the war wasn't over yet.